said that this is Jesus the Christ, the God of Christianity. And they teach these people that this is God, period. That this God, this European image, is synonymous with the Creator. Totally incorrect. Then Islam has Allah. Then Judaism has Yahweh, Jehovah, etc., etc. These are the gods of these various religions. But one has to realize, since all religions are man-made, that man created God in his own image. Man created God for these various religions. These religions, using God, which the God, or the word God, can only be used for religious purposes only. That's what it was intended for. Now, what happens to an individual who embraces a religion is that they entice that human being to come outside of them, of their spiritual power, of their indwelling spirituality that their Creator gave them at the time of their birth, to come outside of that, and what they give you in its place of your indwelling spirituality and your Creator, in other words, it disconnects you from your Creator, that they give you God in its place. So therefore, you take all that spiritual power that your Creator gave you free at the time of your birth, and you inject it into this dead God, or this dead white man on the cross, or into some kind of Allah, or some kind of Jehovah, and etc., etc. See? So therefore, this keeps us into total confusion. We can never find our way back to our ancestral roots and our ancestors as being the great people that they are, the ancient Egyptians. We have to go and find our way back to ancient Egypt. That's what we have to do. No place, no other country in Africa will give us back our greatness, but the culture, the civilization that was created in Egypt during the time of antiquity by an African people that is known to us today as the ancient Egyptians.
Brother Williams, Brother Walter, you said that that Egypt is the only historical place in Africa that will give us back the full understanding of our history and our greatness and our impact to the rest of the world. But perhaps you will define for us what encompassed Egypt. When we say Egypt, what location, what territory are we talking about? What people are we talking about?
Well, you see, you have to go back into the time of antiquity. The term antiquity means ancient times. And you go back and look at your world map, and you look and find in the continent of Africa the country called Egypt. That was all part of it. And then you look, as you go south, you'll find a country on the right-hand side of your map called Ethiopia. And then you look on the left-hand side, across from Ethiopia is the Sudan. And then you will understand that inside of Egypt, there were living a people called Nubians. So what I'm saying is that the Nubians, the ancient Egyptians, the Ethiopian, the Sudanese who live in the Sudan are all one and the same, simply because they made up what is known as the Nile Valley civilization. The ancient Egyptian had an ancient Egyptian African Commonwealth. And under that umbrella of the Commonwealth of ancient Egypt encompass these land areas, these geographical land areas that I just mentioned to you just a moment ago, that created the existence of the Nile Valley civilization.
I'd like to ask you as a beginning point, because I think that this is going to be a very exciting and explosive exploration. We're talking about history. But you just laid out for me history. When history began, who wrote history, how it evolved, And I'd like for you to go through that whole process again, because we're not going to understand what you're talking about as we proceed unless we first get a deep understanding of what we mean by history, when it begins, who wrote it, who established it, what did they encompass, and how they did it.
Okay. First place, you have to go back and understand that the ancient Egyptians were the only people during the time of antiquity that had invented a writing form. They invented 3 forms of writing that we know of today. And those forms of writing is known as the meta-nature hieroglyphics, which are pictorial symbols. And the second form is known as the hieratic demotic, which is a cursive form. And the third is the phonetic writing, or the printed form, called the phonetic script. Sometimes it's misnomer and called the Phoenician script. There's no such thing as a Phoenician, because Phoenicians leads you back to the Canaanites and the Israelites, and that leads you back to Bible literature, and you cannot use the Bible to establish any form of history. Mm-hmm. Okay, in fact, I take the Bible in my lectures and throw it in the garbage can because it's historically worthless. Mm-hmm. So we have to go back to the people who created writing as a form or as a discipline. And the people that created writing is known to us today in history as the ancient Egyptians. Mm-hmm. They were the only people that were literate during the time of antiquity. No other races of people, no place on planet Earth had a form of writing. They were illiterate, including the Greeks and the Romans. There's never been an institution that ever came out of Greece during the time of antiquity. So rule the Greeks out of being a literate people. Okay? All writing forms came from one source, the ancient Egyptians. And like I said before, they created these 3 forms of writing. And the hieratic script, which is a cursive form, is the cursive form of the phonetic printed form. Okay? So you have to understand that. Now, the ancient Egyptians did not write a history of themselves. The people during the time of antiquity never wrote a history of themselves. But let's get back to the ancient Egyptians not writing a history of themselves. If they wrote anything about themselves, it was in pictorial form, known as the hieroglyphs. And the hieroglyphics, meta-nature, has never, ever been deciphered. So don't let Europeans tell you, and their African-trained scholars tell you, that the hieroglyphics has been deciphered, because the hieroglyphics has never been deciphered. Mm-hmm. Okay? And in my book, The Historical Origin of Christianity, which is this book here, the revised edition, I have on page 146 an appendix of why the meta-nature hieroglyphics has never been deciphered. Anyone that wants to repudiate that should read this and explain to you step by step why I said that the hieroglyphics has never been deciphered. So here you have a people, one race, one culture, and one civilization of people living in Africa who are Africans. I didn't say were Africans, they still are Africans, the ancient Egyptians. Had the only form of writing that has ever existed on planet Earth. Okay? Then you have to modulate through the process of time and come up to a time in history. And by the way, history is created by 4 components: time, people, places, and events. That's the substance and the ingredients that creates history. Okay? And I'm going to skip a little bit. They said that the Greeks had an alphabet. Greeks never had an alphabet. I'm going to tell you how the Greek language got an alphabet. After Alexander the Greek came into Egypt in 332 BCE, he forced the Greek language on our ancestors, the ancient Egyptians. By them being a literate people, they took one of their alphabets and applied it to the Greek language. So the Greeks never had an alphabet, but it was the Greek language that an alphabet was applied to by the ancient Egyptians after the Greek language was forced on them.